You know, in the Wheat Belly and Undoctored lifestyles that I advocate, calories don't matter. Calories no longer matter. Now, that's not true if you're eating the wrong diet. If you eat the wrong diet, calories do matter. If you overconsume, for instance, sugars and other sources of carbohydrates, you can wildly lose control over weight and other health issues. But in my lifestyles, where we do a number of things, including banishing all sources of wheat and grains, that is the seeds of grasses, that's what grains are, a number of wonderful things happen. One, you no longer provoke insulin. The standard American diet is filled with foods that provoke insulin. Insulin causes fat growth, fat deposition, and causes you to not mobilize fat energy. So when insulin goes up, as it does, say, in pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, or just by consuming carbohydrates, you cultivate insulin resistance, which causes higher blood levels of insulin, which in turn cause fat deposition and inhibits fat mobilization. So any food that provokes insulin can cause weight gain or at least prevent weight loss. So when we follow my lifestyles, where we remove all wheat and grains, we remove the amylopectin A supercarbohydrate. That is a flagrant trigger for insulin as well as blood sugar. So take those foods out, you don't trigger insulin. You don't trigger blood sugar as much. And over time, insulin resistance reverses. You get even more of a bang in reversing insulin resistance, by the way, when you do the other components of my programs. Correct your vitamin D deficiency, correct your omega-3 fatty acid deficiency, correct your magnesium deficiency, make efforts to cultivate healthy bowel flora and some other steps. All that contributes to a reversal of insulin resistance, and blood levels of insulin drop, and it allows you to lose weight. Another reason why calories don't count in my lifestyles is we do not restrict fats or oils. We choose healthier fats or oils. I would regard, by the way, saturated fat as a healthy oil. The unhealthy oils are hydrogenated oils, polyunsaturates, that come from such things as corn oil, mixed vegetable oils, other seed-type oils. So we avoid those, but we use lots and lots of butter, coconut oil. We never choose lean cuts of meat. If you buy a pork chop or salmon or steak, always leave the fat on, leave the skin on. We want that healthy fat. So when you do that, you're satiated. Fats and oils are satiating. So put more butter in on your dishes. Use more coconut oil. Never choose lean cuts of meat. So more fat is satiating, and it becomes a very potent limiting factor on calories. So don't worry about calories. Don't count calories. It takes care of themselves if you don't limit fat. Another reason why calories don't matter in these lifestyles is because when you go wheat and grain free, you've removed the gliadin protein of wheat and related proteins in other grains. And it's this gliadin protein that upon partial digestion in the human gastrointestinal tract yield opioid peptides. And these opioid peptides that are 4 or 5 amino acids long are small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier and bind to the opiate receptors of the human brain. But they don't make you high. They can have a whole range of peculiar effects depending on your individual susceptibility. For example, people with a tendency towards binge eating disorder or bulimia, they can experience 24-hour-a-day food obsessions. Kids with ADHD or autistic spectrum disorder can experience behavioral outbursts. But those of us who don't have those conditions, the opioid peptides that come from the gliadin protein of wheat stimulate appetite. They cause you to take in more calories, typically 400 to 800 more calories per person per day. Take out gliadin-derived opioid peptides, and hunger, appetite drop. You are given magnificent control over food choices, appetite, impulse, and that need to eat all the time goes away. You'll be satisfied for extended periods. So once again, with this lifestyle, calories do not matter. But what happens when you do cut calories? What kinds of nasty stuff happens when you cut calories? You know, the Biggest Loser TV show spawned a number of studies, clinical studies, that showed us just how harmful cutting calories can be. So you may remember in that show, these poor people were badgered and hounded, right, to exercise to extreme degrees while maintaining a low-calorie intake of around 1,400 calories per day, which is very deficient when you're exercising to that degree. Well, they did lose a lot of weight, right? 50, 70, 100, 130 pounds was a commonplace thing on that show. Well, what happened to those people after they left the show, maintained the reduced calories, and maintained a fairly vigorous exercise program for most of them. Not as vigorous as a TV show, but still quite a vigorous exercise program. They virtually all regained the weight. Now, that's a problem. What happens when you regain that kind of weight? It's virtually all fat. When you lose weight, about a third of that weight loss is muscle. So if you lose 30 pounds, say, 10 pounds more or less is lost muscle. When you regain the 30 pounds, it's 30 pounds of fat. What does that do? What makes you metabolically challenged? Because it reduces your basal metabolic rate, the rate at which energy burns. And people who completed the Biggest Loser show and lost weight and then regained it, despite continued calorie reduction, had a lower metabolic rate by about 25%. In other words, even though they maintained a low-calorie program with exercise, they regained weight anyway because they were not burning calories anymore, and they regained all that weight. And part of the reason is because you lose muscle when you lose weight also. Another problem that occurs when you cut calories is you put yourself at high risk for gallstone formation. Because when you cut calories, or even worse, cut calories and cut fat, it means your gallbladder is not needed to spit out its bile. And that bile becomes stagnant, bile stasis, we say. And when you have stagnant bile, it begins to crystallize. And over time, it collects into stones. And that often leads to need for gallbladder surgery. This is very common in people who cut calories and or cut fat. In fact, it's contrary to most thinking, where we think that gallstones typically develop in over months to years. Gallstones can develop when you cut fat and or calories. They can start to develop within weeks. You can actually see a lot of people have gallstones at 4 weeks after cutting calories, after cutting fat. And another reason why counting calories doesn't matter in my lifestyles is because it makes you miserable. You know this. When you cut calories, push the plate away, move more, eat less, all that business that you hear from conventional circles, it makes you miserable. It makes you obsess about food, makes you hungry, that gnawing, desperate hunger you get. So following this lifestyle, you don't get that, because you've removed gliadin-derived opioid peptides, you've been taking in fat, right? So you don't have that kind of continual gnawing every 2-hour type of hunger that other people get. So in my lifestyles, in the Wheat Belly and Undoctored lifestyles, calories no longer matter. For that reason, we don't count calories, we don't limit calories, we don't push the plate away, or any of those silly ideas that you hear echoed elsewhere.